swore she would never let anyone hear the music inside her heart, but he became the only person who could listen to her silence. Mia Anderson had been silent for most of her life. Not by choice, but by a cruel twist of fate that took her voice when she was 7 years old. A car accident, a shattered windshield, and damage to her vocal cords that doctors said would never heal. The world moved on, but Mia remained trapped in a prison of silence, watching life happen around her, while she could only observe from behind an invisible wall. At 22, she worked at a small music store in downtown Boston, organizing sheet music and cleaning instruments she would never be able to sing about. Her hands were her voice now, signing words that most people didn't bother to learn. Her father had died 3 years ago, leaving her alone with memories and a dusty upright piano in their small apartment. The same piano where he used to play while she hummed along, back when her voice still existed. But everything changed the day Ethan Cole walked into the store. He was looking for piano strings, he said. His dark hair fell over intense blue eyes that seemed to carry their own kind of silence, a different silence than hers. Where her silence was forced, his seemed chosen, deliberate. He wore expensive clothes, but moved with the weariness of someone carrying invisible weight. When their eyes met across the counter, something electric passed between them, something neither of them could name. Mia wrote on her notepad, "Which brand do you need?" and slid it across the counter. Ethan stared at the words longer than necessary before meeting her eyes again. He understood immediately. No pity, no awkward questions, just understanding. He wrote back on the same notepad, the ones that sound like home. That simple exchange became their language. Ethan started coming to the store every week, sometimes twice a week. He would browse, ask questions by writing them down, and Mia would respond the same way. Her co-worker Jennifer thought it was the strangest courtship she had ever witnessed. But to Mia, it felt like finally being seen. Ethan never treated her silence as a disability. He treated it as another way of speaking. 3 months into their written conversations, Ethan invited Mia to his apartment. She hesitated, her fingers trembling as she wrote, "Why?" His response came quickly, "I want you to hear something." His apartment was in the wealthy part of town, a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But what caught Mia's attention was the grand piano dominating the living room, its black surface reflecting the city lights like a mirror to another world. It was the most beautiful instrument she had ever seen. Ethan sat at the bench and gestured for her to join him. She did, her heart pounding so loudly she thought he might hear it. Then he began to play. The music that flowed from his fingers was heartbreaking and beautiful, a melody that seemed to contain all the words neither of them could say. Mia closed her eyes and let it wash over her, feeling the vibrations through the bench, through her bones, through the parts of her that had forgotten what it meant to truly feel. When he finished, he turned to her and wrote, "I lost someone too. My sister. She loved music more than anything. I promised her I would never stop playing." Mia's hands shook as she wrote back, "I lost my voice. But when you play, I can hear everything." That night, something shifted between them. The careful distance they had maintained crumbled, replaced by something raw and undeniable. Ethan pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers, and in that moment of complete silence, they both heard everything they needed to hear. Their relationship bloomed in quiet moments. Ethan would play for her every evening, and Mia would rest her hand on the piano to feel the music through her fingertips. She started teaching him sign language, and he learned with the dedication of someone studying a sacred text. They communicated in a hybrid of written notes, signs, and the universal language of touch. But Mia's past had other plans. 6 months into their relationship, Mia received a letter that made her blood run cold. Her mother, who had abandoned her and her father 12 years ago after the accident, wanted to meet a woman who had looked at her voiceless daughter and decided she couldn't handle it, who had walked away without ever looking back, suddenly wanted back in her life. The letter was full of apologies and regrets, but Mia felt nothing but rage. She showed the letter to Ethan, her hands signing furiously. "She left me when I needed her most. She doesn't get to come back now." But Ethan's response surprised her. He wrote, "Maybe you need to hear what she has to say, not for her. For you." The suggestion felt like betrayal. Mia pushed away from him, her eyes blazing with anger. How could he possibly understand? He had lost his sister to death, not to choice. His sister hadn't chosen to leave him behind. They didn't speak for 3 days. 3 days of suffocating silence that felt different from their comfortable quiet. This silence was heavy with unspoken hurt and misunderstanding. It was Ethan who broke first. He showed up at her apartment at midnight with his laptop, and when she opened the door, He turned the screen to face her. It was a video of his sister, recorded just weeks before she died. In the video, a young woman with Ethan's same intense eyes sat at a piano. She looked at the camera and said, "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. And if you're alone, Ethan, it means you're being stubborn about letting people in. Don't be like that. Don't push away love because you're afraid of losing it. I'm gone, but I got to love you while I was here. That was everything."
Tears rolled down Ethan's face as he wrote, "I push everyone away because I'm terrified of losing them like I lost her. But then I met you, and your silence taught me that love isn't about words. It's about showing up. It's about being present even when it's hard." Mia grabbed a pen with shaking hands. "I'm scared too. Scared that if I let my mother back in, she'll leave again. Scared that if I let myself be vulnerable, I'll be abandoned again." Ethan took her hands in his. "I'm not going anywhere. Face your mother, face your fear, and I'll be right there with you. You're not alone." The meeting with her mother happened 3 weeks later at a small cafe. Mia brought Ethan for support, his hand a steady anchor in hers. When her mother walked in, Mia barely recognized her. The woman looked older, worn down by guilt and time. Her mother's hands trembled as she signed, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I was weak when I should have been strong. When you lost your voice, I felt like I lost my daughter. And I didn't know how to be a mother to someone I had to learn to understand all over again. I was a coward." Mia felt Ethan squeeze her hand encouragingly. She signed back slowly. "You were supposed to love me no matter what. You were supposed to stay." "I know," her mother signed, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I can't change the past, but I've spent 12 years learning sign language, reading about selective mutism and trauma, going to therapy to understand why I ran. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life." The conversation lasted 2 hours. Her mother explained how she had battled depression and anxiety, how she had been overwhelmed by the accident and her own inability to cope. She didn't make excuses, but she offered context. She told Mia about the little apartment she lived in now, working as a speech therapist, helping other families navigate communication disorders, helping others do what she couldn't do for her own daughter. When they finally left the cafe, Mia felt emotionally drained but somehow lighter. She turned to Ethan and signed, "Thank you for pushing me to do this." He signed back, his movements still a bit clumsy but full of love. "You taught me that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about facing what hurts and choosing to move forward anyway." But their happiness was short-lived. 2 months after the reunion with her mother, Mia discovered something that shattered her world. She was at Ethan's apartment, looking for a book he had mentioned, when she found a file folder tucked in his desk. Inside was a medical report with her name on it, a report about experimental surgery that could potentially restore vocal cord function. The report was dated 3 weeks after they had met. Her hands shook as she read through page after page of consultations, doctor's notes, and financial transactions. Ethan had been researching her condition from the very beginning. He had consulted with specialists, even paid for preliminary evaluations without her knowledge. When Ethan came home, he found her sitting on the couch, the folder open on her lap, tears streaming down her face. He knew immediately what had happened. Mia's signs were sharp, angry. "How could you do this behind my back? I am not your project to fix." Ethan dropped to his knees in front of her, his own signs desperate. "I wasn't trying to fix you. I was trying to give you a choice. You never had a choice before. The accident took your voice without asking. I just wanted to find out if there was a way to give you that choice back. But you didn't tell me." Mia signed furiously. "You researched my medical history, talked to doctors about me. That's not love. That's control." "You're right," Ethan signed, his movements slowing down with defeat. "You're absolutely right. I thought I was helping, but I was so focused on the solution that I didn't think about what it would feel like to you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Mia stood up, the folder clutched in her hands. She signed one last thing before walking out. "I fell in love with you because you saw me as whole, not broken. But this," she gestured to the folder, "this says you never really saw me at all. You saw someone who needed fixing." She left him there, kneeling on the floor of his expensive apartment, and walked out into the cold November night. The silence between them now felt like a canyon neither of them could cross. Weeks passed. Mia threw herself into work, ignoring Jennifer's concerned looks and her mother's increasingly worried texts. She had started having weekly coffee meetings with her mother, slowly rebuilding something that resembled a relationship. But there was an ache in her chest that wouldn't go away, an Ethan-shaped hole that pulsed with every heartbeat. One evening, her mother signed to her over coffee, "You know he came to see me." Mia's hands froze mid-sign. "When last week, he asked me about your accident, about what the doctors said back then. He showed me the research he had done." She paused, watching her daughter carefully. "He wasn't trying to fix you, Mia. He was trying to give you power. There's a difference." Mia shook her head. "But he didn't tell me." Her mother reached across the table and took her daughter's hands. "When you were little, before the accident, you used to sing all the time. You wanted to be on Broadway. You had dreams that involved your voice. After the accident, you locked those dreams away because you thought they were impossible. What if they're not? What if he's offering you a chance to decide for yourself whether you want to try?" The words haunted Mia for days. She had been so angry at Ethan for taking away her agency, but had she been equally angry at the possibility that things could be different? Had she built her entire identity around being voiceless to the point where the possibility of having a voice again felt like a threat? She finally opened the folder again, reading through it with clear eyes instead of angry ones. The surgery wasn't a guarantee. There was a 40% chance it could restore some vocal function, maybe enough to speak in whispers, maybe enough to sing again. But there was also a 20% chance it could make things worse, and a 40% chance nothing would change at all. It was a choice. That's what Ethan had been trying to give her, a choice. Mia showed up at Ethan's apartment on a Tuesday evening. She knocked instead of using the doorbell, their old signal. When he opened the door, he looked terrible. His hair was messy, his eyes red-rimmed, and he had clearly lost weight. But when he saw her, something lit up in his face before he carefully controlled it. She held up her notepad. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside immediately. They sat at the piano, their place, and Mia wrote everything she needed to say. "I was angry because I was scared. Scared that if I couldn't face me, I would lose the person I've become. Scared that you wanted me to be different. But I've been thinking, and I realized something. You never asked me to change. You just wanted me to have the choice that was stolen from me. I'm sorry I ran." Ethan's response was immediate. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you from the beginning. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just protecting myself from your potential rejection of the idea. You are perfect exactly as you are. If you never wanted to pursue the surgery, I would spend the rest of my life learning every sign language in the world just to communicate with you better." Mia's hands trembled as she wrote her next words. "What if I want to try? What if I want to see if I can sing again?" Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Then I'll be in the front row at your first performance, or I'll hold your hand through every moment of recovery if it doesn't work, or I'll support whatever decision you make, even if that decision is to leave things exactly as they are. I love you, Mia, all of you, voice or no voice." She reached for his hand and placed it over her heart. He could feel it racing. Then she picked up the pen one more time. "Teach me the song you wrote for your sister. I want to play it with you." They spent the night at the piano, Ethan teaching her the melody note by note, their hands moving together across the keys. The music they created was imperfect and beautiful, just like them. 3 months later, Mia sat in a consultation room with Ethan and her mother on either side of her. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the leading specialists in vocal cord reconstruction, reviewed her case file with careful attention. "The surgery is risky," Dr. Chen signed. She had learned specifically to communicate with patients like Mia. "We would be working with scar tissue. That's over 15 years old. Success isn't guaranteed. But if you decide to proceed, I believe there's a real chance we could restore at least partial function." Mia looked at Ethan, then at her mother, then back at the doctor. She signed. "How long do I have to decide?" Dr. Chen smiled. "As long as you need. This is your choice, Mia, no one else's." That night, Mia stood in front of the mirror in her apartment, looking at the faint scar on her throat, where the doctors had operated all those years ago. She tried to imagine what her voice might sound like now. Would it be the same as it was when she was 7, or would it be different, aged by years of silence? She picked up her phone and texted Ethan, "Can you come over?" He arrived 20 minutes later, out of breath from running up the stairs. When she opened the door, she pulled him inside and led him to her father's old piano. She sat at the bench and patted the space beside her. When he sat down, she began to play. It was the song he had taught her, his sister's song, but she played it differently now. She had added her own variations, her own interpretation. The music filled the small apartment, and when she finished, she turned to him with tears in her eyes. She signed, "I want to try the surgery. Not because I'm broken, and not because I think I need a voice. I want to try because that 7-year-old girl who dreamed of singing on Broadway deserves to know if it's possible. She deserves a chance to at least try, and if it doesn't work, I'll be okay. Because I've learned that I can create beautiful things even in silence." Ethan pulled her close, his arms wrapped around her so tightly she could barely breathe. Against her hair, he whispered, "I love you. With or without words, I love you." The surgery was scheduled for February 14th, Valentine's Day. Mia joked that it was either incredibly romantic or incredibly cursed. There was no in between. Ethan bought her a necklace with a small piano pendant. Her mother gave her a journal to document her recovery. Jennifer from the music store organized a whole care package of books and puzzles for the hospital stay. The night before the surgery, Mia couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, when her phone lit up with a message from Ethan. "I'm outside." She went to the window and looked down. There he was, standing in the street below her apartment building with his phone in hand. He looked up and saw her, then held up a sign. It said, "Come downstairs." Mia threw on a jacket and rushed down. When she burst through the front door, she found Ethan standing next to a car with the trunk open. Inside was a portable keyboard. He signed, "I couldn't let you spend tonight alone and scared, so I brought music." Right there, in the middle of the street at 2 in the morning, Ethan set up the keyboard and began to play. He played everything they had ever learned together, every song that meant something to them, every melody that had become their private language. Neighbors' lights turned on. Some complained, some watched from windows, but Mia didn't care. She sat on the curb and listened, her hand over her heart, feeling the music in her bones. When he finally finished, she stood and walked to him. She took his face in her hands and kissed him with everything she had. Then she signed against his lips, "No matter what happens tomorrow, we already have this. This is enough. This is everything." The surgery took 8 hours. Ethan and her mother waited in uncomfortable plastic chairs, drinking terrible coffee and checking the clock every 5 minutes. When Dr. Chen finally emerged, her expression was carefully neutral. "The surgery went well," she said to Ethan while signing for Mia's mother. "We were able to repair more damage than I initially thought possible. But I need to be clear. We won't know the extent of success until she wakes up and we can do proper evaluations. It could be weeks or months before we know if she's regained any vocal function." "Can we see her?" Ethan asked. "She's in recovery. Give her another hour, then you can visit for a few minutes." When Mia woke up, the first thing she saw was Ethan's face. He was holding her hand, and tears were streaming down his cheeks. She tried to sign, but the anesthesia made her hands clumsy, so she just squeezed his hand 3 times. "Their code for I love you." He squeezed back 3 times, then twice, then once. "Their code for I love you." Forever. The recovery was harder than anyone anticipated. Mia's throat hurt constantly. She couldn't eat solid food for weeks, and the physical therapy sessions were exhausting. She had to relearn how to use muscles she had forgotten existed. Dr. Chen warned her not to try to speak for at least 6 weeks while everything healed. Those 6 weeks were the longest of Mia's life. Every day she woke up wondering if today would be the day she discovered whether the surgery had worked. Ethan was with her every step of the way, bringing her smoothies, reading to her, playing piano while she rested. Her mother visited every other day, bringing puzzle books and old photo albums. They found pictures of Mia before the accident, pictures of a little girl singing into a hairbrush microphone, wearing princess dresses and dreaming big dreams. Her mother cried over those pictures, and for the first time, Mia let herself cry too, not for what she had lost, but for what she might gain back. The day finally came for her first evaluation with the speech therapist. 6 weeks and 3 days after surgery, Mia sat in a small room with Dr. Chen, Ethan, and her mother. The speech therapist, a kind woman named Gloria, smiled at her encouragingly. "I'm going to ask you to try to make some sounds," Gloria signed. "Don't push too hard. If it hurts, stop immediately. Are you ready?" Mia's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. She looked at Ethan, who gave her a thumbs up. She looked at her mother, who was crying already. Then she looked at Gloria and nodded. "Okay," Gloria signed. "Let's start simple. Try to make an R sound. Just let the air flow naturally." Mia opened her mouth. She focused on her breath, on the muscles in her throat, on the hope that had carried her through 6 weeks of recovery. She tried. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. Her eyes filled with tears. Ethan grabbed her hand. Gloria signed, "It's okay. This is completely normal. We're waking up muscles that have been asleep for years. Let's try something different. Try to hum." Sometimes humming is easier than voiced sounds. Mia closed her mouth and focused everything she had on making a humming sound. She remembered what it felt like when she was 7, how her throat would vibrate when she sang, along with her dad's piano playing. She searched for that feeling, that memory. And then, so soft it was almost imaginary, something happened. A tiny vibration, a whisper of sound. So quiet that she wasn't even sure it was real. But Ethan heard it. His eyes went wide. Gloria heard it. She started nodding excitedly. Her mother heard it. She gasped and covered her mouth. Mia tried again, and this time the hum was stronger. It was rough and unpracticed, but it was there. It was real. Sound was coming from her throat for the first time in over 15 years. She kept humming, the sound growing slightly louder, tears streaming down her face. Ethan was crying now too, still holding a hand like a lifeline. When she finally stopped, exhausted from the effort, the room was silent except for everyone's ragged breathing. Gloria signed with shaking hands. That was incredible. That was real progress. You have vocal function, Mia. We have something to work with. The next 3 months were a journey. Some days Mia could make sounds. Other days her voice disappeared completely. Slowly, painfully slowly, she began to form words. First, just vowel sounds, then simple consonants, then her name. The first time she said Mia out loud, it came out as barely more than a whisper, rough and uncertain. But it was her voice, her new, old voice. Ethan recorded it on his phone and they listened to it 20 times in a row, both of them crying and laughing in equal measure. She learned to say "I love you." She learned to say "Mom." She learned to say "Thank you." Every word felt like a miracle. 6 months after surgery, Mia stood in the music store during closing time. Jennifer had agreed to stay late. Ethan was there with his keyboard. Her mother sat in a folding chair, tissues already in hand. Dr. Chen had even come wanting to see her patient's progress. Mia walked to the old upright piano in the corner of the store. She had asked Ethan to teach her one specific song, her father's favorite song. The one he used to play every night before bed. The one she used to sing with him before the accident. She sat at the bench, her hands shaking. Ethan gave her an encouraging nod. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes were tentative, but as she found her rhythm, confidence flooded through her. The melody filled the small store, beautiful and achingly familiar. And then, when she reached the chorus, she opened her mouth and sang. Her voice was different than it had been when she was 7. It was lower, raspier, marked by years of silence. But it was strong. It was real. She sang her father's favorite song with tears streaming down her face, and the music poured out of her like a river that had finally broken through a dam. When the last note faded, the room was silent. Then everyone erupted. Jennifer was sobbing. Dr. Chen was applauding. Her mother had her hands over her heart, mouthing "thank you" over and over. And Ethan walked to her and pulled her into his arms. Against her hair, he whispered, "That was beautiful. You are beautiful." She pulled back enough to look at his face. Then, in her new rough voice that was still learning to be strong, she said out loud for the first time, "I love you, Ethan Cole." His face crumpled and he kissed her, tasting salt from both their tears. When they finally broke apart, he took her hand and led her back to the piano. They sat side by side on the bench, just like they had hundreds of times before, and together they played. But this time was different. This time, Mia sang 1 year after the surgery. Mia stood backstage at a small theater in Boston. But it was a stage. She was about to perform in a showcase for survivors of trauma, people who had overcome impossible odds to pursue their dreams. Her hands were shaking, her throat was dry, and she was absolutely terrified. Ethan appeared beside her, as if summoned by her fear. He took her face in his hands and pressed his forehead to hers. "You've got this," he whispered. "And if your voice gives out halfway through, I'll be in the front row applauding anyway, because you are already brave, you already won." She kissed him quickly, then watched him walk away to take his seat. Her mother was out there too, and Jennifer, and Dr. Chen, and Gloria, all the people who had fought alongside her for this moment. When her name was called, Mia walked onto the stage. The spotlight was blinding, but she found her way to the piano in the center. She sat at the bench, her hands finding the familiar keys, and looked out at the audience. She couldn't see their faces past the lights, but she knew they were there. She took a deep breath and began to play. The song she had chosen was the one Ethan had written for his sister, the one that had brought them together, the one that had taught her that music could speak when words failed. As her fingers moved across the keys, she felt all the fear drain away, replaced by something pure and powerful. And then she sang. Her voice, still rough around the edges, still marked by the years of silence, filled the theater. She sang about loss and love, about silence and sound, about the journey from broken to whole that was never really about being fixed at all. When the song ended, the audience was on their feet. The applause was thunderous, but all Mia could hear was her own heartbeat, steady and strong. She found Ethan in the crowd, standing in the front row exactly where he promised he would be, tears streaming down his face and love written all over every feature. She had spent 15 years in silence, learning a different way to speak, discovering that she didn't need a voice to be heard. And now, standing on this stage with her new old voice, singing into the darkness, she realized the most important truth of all. Her silence had never been the absence of something. It had been the presence of something different. It had been the space where she learned that love transcends language, that music lives in more than just sound, and that sometimes the most beautiful songs are the ones we learn to sing in the quiet. After the showcase, people crowded around Mia, asking questions, offering congratulations. She answered them all as best she could, her voice growing tired, but her spirit soaring. When the crowd finally thinned, she found Ethan waiting for her by the stage door, his hands in his pockets, that half smile she loved so much playing on his lips, ready to go home. He signed. She signed back, almost home. He raised an eyebrow, confused. She took his hand and led him back onto the empty stage. The lights were dimmed now, the seats empty, but the space still hummed with the energy of performance. She walked to the piano and pulled something from her pocket, a small velvet box. Ethan's eyes went wide as she dropped to one knee. She opened the box to reveal a simple silver band. Using both her voice and her signs, she said, "You taught me that silence can speak, and that music can heal, and that love is the only language that matters. You stood by me when I had no voice, and you stood by me when I was learning to find it again. You never tried to fix me because you never saw me as broken." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "Ethan Cole, will you marry me?" For a moment, he just stared at her, his mouth open in shock. Then he dropped to his knees beside her and signed yes over and over while saying it out loud. Yes, yes, yes. They kissed there on the empty stage, two people who had found each other in silence and learned to create music together, two halves of a whole that was greater than either of them alone. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony at the music store where they had met. Mia wore a simple white dress and the piano necklace Ethan had given her before surgery. Ethan wore a suit and the ring she had proposed with. The ceremony was conducted in both spoken word and sign language, honoring both parts of who Mia was. When it came time for vows, Mia stood in front of everyone who mattered and sang them. She sang about finding love in silence, about learning that broken things can still create beauty, about choosing courage even when the outcome is uncertain. Her voice cracked on some words, failed completely on others, but she pushed through. And when she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Ethan's vows were simpler. He took her hands and said, "I promise to love every version of you, the silent one, the singing one, and all the versions still to come. I promise to always see you as whole, because you are, you always have been." And he kissed her while their friends and family cheered. The reception was held in the same store, surrounded by instruments and sheet music, and the ghosts of all the melodies that had been played there over the years. Mia and Ethan's first dance was to a piano piece they had written together, a duet that told their entire story in notes instead of words. As they swayed together, Mia whispered in his ear, "Thank you for hearing me when I had no voice." He pulled back to look at her face. "Thank you for teaching me that some of the most important things can't be heard at all. They have to be felt." Years would pass. Mia would continue performing at small venues, building a career not on Broadway but in community theaters and healing spaces where her story could inspire others. She would write a book about her journey that would help other selective mute individuals find their voices. Whatever form those voices took, she would remain in contact with her mother, their relationship healed if not perfect, building something new from the ashes of what was lost. Ethan would continue playing piano, but he would also start teaching children with disabilities, showing them that music belongs to everyone regardless of how they experience it. He would establish a foundation in his sister's name that provided instruments and lessons to kids who could not afford them. Together, they would navigate all of life's challenges the way they had navigated falling in love, with patience, understanding, and the knowledge that the strongest connections are built not in spite of our differences, but because of them. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, they would sit at their piano at home, the grand one from Ethan's apartment that now lived in the house they bought together, and they would play. Sometimes Mia would sing, sometimes she would stay silent, communicating through the keys instead. But always, always, they would create music together, because they had learned the most important lesson of all. Love doesn't need words, it doesn't even need sound. It just needs two people willing to listen with more than their ears, to speak with more than their voices, and to understand that the most beautiful songs are the ones written in the space between silence and sound. The piano in their living room became a symbol of their journey, a testament to the truth that broken things can still make music, that silence can be as eloquent as speech, and that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that teach us to hear with our hearts. What would you do if you loved someone who couldn't speak? Would you learn their language? Would you find new ways to communicate? Or would you walk away because it was too difficult? Mia and Ethan chose to build a bridge between their worlds, to meet each other where they were instead of demanding the other change. They chose love, not in spite of their challenges, but through them, because that's what real love does. It doesn't erase our struggles, it walks through them with us, hand in hand, note by note, until the silence itself becomes a kind of music.